Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today for episode 178 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. Well, you know what? Actually, the reports of the Foundry's death are greatly exaggerated. So, it's just a lengthy downtime, but we soldier on. I, of course, am your, not your funeral director, but your host, Drogan1701. And with me are not mourners, but celebrants, revelers, Greendragoon, and DuncanIdaho.
Hello, hello.
I don't know if I'm reveling the Foundry downtime, but I'm definitely soldiering on.
We're sharing, we're celebrating the pain.
It's a celebration of life.
Yes.
Because that's the only alternative.
We're channeling despair into drunkenness.
So anyway, obviously we are just in the middle of an epic downtime. Unfortunately, due to a real problem, apparently. So I think Duncan has probably been keeping up with this the best of all of us. So why don't you see if you can take us through it?
Things don't work. Okay. So, more detail though. So way back, we had a little bit of a heads up from Cryptic that there was a server problem and the Foundry had to come back down. And as it turns out, there was a issue discovered by the core team that has affected both the Neverwinter and the SDO Foundry. They are working to fix the problem, which is apparently with publishing. So it could be that in working out some server stuff for Season 14, someone did something and now the Foundry can't manually publish missions. I mean, that's kind of my take on what might be going on. Like, to the extent of having to get rid of everything, because mission play was fine, but we've just been told it's publishing and servers. So the extent of the problem, we don't really know, but that would just be my guess. But anyway, though, Cryptic's been working on the issue, and they are actively working on this. We've been getting occasional updates from Kale. And the this last was it Friday? We had a false glimmer of hope. There was a randomized or scheduled endeavor for the Foundry that came up that day, and Cryptic tried to bring the Foundry back up just on the hope that, well, they might have fixed the problem, but they hadn't fully tested it out yet. So basically, they just sent it up and did the best they could, and unfortunately the Foundry hasn't been fixed yet, so it didn't come back online yesterday. But they're still working on it.
Yeah, the on Friday the Endeavor came up for the Foundry, which I assume there's like a rotation of these things, like a pool of it that it can select from.
Yeah.
And the Foundry Endeavor was not taken out of the pool, and this is just the first time it's come up randomly.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Alternately, could be scheduling it because they did come up with a very poignant one directly thereafter, kill Terran ships, which is just kind of like, and they've kind of done that too, where it makes sense.
Well, we know now they can change these on the fly.
Yeah, so it could just be that they also scheduled these in advance, and they just didn't anticipate the Foundry being down this long. Mm-hmm. So we got it there anyway. So it just, however these are selected, we got a Foundry Endeavor unintentionally, and Cryptic did the very best they could to see if they can bring it back that day. And they just gave it.
They went on Treble apparently and tried to test to see if they could bring missions back up,
and apparently
it did not work.
Yeah, for whatever reason, we haven't been given the full details on that, but yeah, Foundry's not working. Zero is aware; they're working on it, so maybe sometime.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've been sort of doing whatever we can to pass the time. We've been doing. We did a mission live play when missions were up briefly, and we did a couple of classic Trek game live streams, and taken a couple of weeks off as well. So, that's filled up the 6 weeks here. But we wanted to get in this show, obviously to make sure that we know everybody. We're still here. We're still soldiering on.
The Foundry
and
is
also
not
we have
gone.
the holidays. Foundry's not gone. We're not gone. And next weekend is the holidays, Thanksgiving holiday in America. So most of us will be around family at some point. So we figured we'd take that week off and do a show this week.
And as far as the Foundry coming back online soon, because it's Thanksgiving next week, I would not anticipate it coming back unless there's progress at like Monday.
It'll short week.
Yeah.
Hard to know what their schedule is. I mean, my schedule is I'm off Thursday, but I go back into work Friday. So.
Yeah, I'm off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I do want to say for people who are watching the live stream, as in Spiritborn, we just put our buffs in a circle. You can kind of join us on the skeleton. It's party. We just want to keep we just got lots of buffs, so we just decided to put them in a bit of a ring.
So my first thought, as we were talking about before the show, was to find a graveyard, but I don't think there's actually any of those in Stowe. So.
No.
The irony, of course, is we could make one if we had the Foundry.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we are. We've all been doing different things to pass time, playing Stowe, playing the game, playing different games. I have braved the controversy and bought Battlefront 2.
Yay!
Which is fun.
Yeah,
if you can get past the crappy business model stuff, it is fun. It's a fun game.
Yeah, it seemed like a pretty solid shooter. I've been playing Titanfall 2. And yeah, Respawn was just bought by EA, so we'll see what goes on with that one. But it's interesting just to kind of get out and just see other types of gameplay, other types of map building, because that does help in just sort of coming up with new ideas for the Foundry. Just the more you see, the more experience, the more you can sort of bring that back into Star Trek Online to make something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about Battlefront 2 is it has, one of the main complaints about the first game was it didn't have a single player campaign. So they built one for Battlefront 2, and it has a couple of very interesting levels that are a little Star Trek Online like, in which they transition from flying spaceships into walking around on the ground.
Yay!
So there's that kind of space ground format that Stowe missions take. So it felt very familiar.
Yes, Titanfall did the same, basically is following the same progression. It has a standout first-time campaign mode, even though it's Titanfall 2. And they do have a bimodal gameplay style, except it's a lot more fluid and integrated between giant stampy robot and running around on foot. And on that one, at least, it does... I've been kind of aching to follow along with a few cues on that one with some character development, because that one did have a really strong campaign just in terms of the writing and the characters and how it uses dialogue. So that's just stuff you can pay attention to when you're playing something else, just to see, hey, how's this telling a story, and is it working, is it not working, and can I try to use any of these ideas for my own game?
The basic format that we use in the Foundry is really kind of a universal thing for games. It's either go to this place, interact with this thing, or kill these enemies, or talk to this person.
Yeah,
it's like those four types of objectives are pretty universal.
Yeah. Touch the thing, hit the button, fight the thing, run to the thing, thing explodes.
Yeah, you don't really get past that unless you start getting into mini games and stuff.
Spiritborn is saying no BF2 spoilers, please. Well, yeah, okay. I'm not going to spoil any of the story content. I'm just going to, just talking structure of the maps and the missions. It is a good story. I recommend if you feel like you want to play it, it's pretty cool for the story aspect. So let's see what else we got going tonight. We came up with some different things to try and get a full show out of Foundry Downtime.
One quick last bit of news we can do.
Yes.
We did get some word on 10 Forward Weekly that, kind of the most obvious thing that's coming up is coming up, and the most obvious thing about it is also coming up as well. So we're getting the winter event sometime soon, and it will include a new activity. And that was from Kale on 10 Forward. And we have a special graphic for that, if we can pull that up.
I would assume that we are getting the winter event either right as the mirror event shuts down or the week after.
Yeah, so there's some speculation on the forums just based on year date that it could be something like December 7th. But it's usually that first, second week of December is when that pops up. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's all subject to change. Nothing's been announced yet. Cryptic doesn't talk about upcoming content. And
except that they just did.
Except they did, but it's kind of
tiny amounts.
The things
and
you can say,
things that we would guess. Anyway.
Yeah, the things you can say about every single winter event is it's just coming up. So it's something to think about, and especially when it comes to planning on how you're going to be approaching Stowe for the next month, because we will have a new ship to grind for.
Yes, the events are always a good thing to do if you are looking for a free tier 6 ship.
Yeah. And just for abilities too, there's some pretty good kit module. Some kit modules, and also
kit modules and bridge officer.
Yeah, and one of my favorite is from last year or the year before is endothermic induction beam, and it's great for exotic damage builds because you can basically load up from engineering slots. So that's been great.
Yeah.
Yep. So there we go. That's this is prepare for winter. Here is the anatomy of your enemy that you should be paying attention to. The snowman is a very dangerous creature, and we shall be fighting lots of these. And you notice it's got, unlike we think we know about the snowman, but it's got very, very disturbing components to it. It's got a head, abdomen, thorax. It's got segmented arms, multiple eyes. It's an insect, so be on the lookout for them. They will attack.
But it's only got 2 limbs.
It's only got 2 limbs because the other ones are internalized. It's evolved to only have 2. Retrograde evolution.
I'll have to trust you on that.
This is what happens when we employ a biologist.
So yeah, anyway, that's also something that's basically like, hey, that's what I've been doing with my downtime.
Making goofy art.
Yeah, well, it's a tardigrade art, so same style. So it
is a natural progression of your tardigrade art. Yes.
Yes.
I don't know. Bring back the Foundry or the MS Paint art gets it.
Yep. And we may have more of that later in the show.
Let's see. You also had some stuff you wanted to talk about with our 26th century challenge, Duncan, which of course we will be, the Anthology series and plus the challenge, which we will be doing whenever downtime expires.
Yep. That's what I've been basically working on. So just what I've been doing is trying to set an outline in motion, or just get that together. So I know what I'm building at the start. I've got a lot more confident base because what I've been kind of doing a lot is getting started on a project, kind of getting lost in it, doing a lot of detailed work, and it really not producing a finalized mission. Fated Horizon was my last big hurrah of like, I can actually complete a mission, and then afterwards I didn't get rolling again. So I'm doing another outline in full, just make sure I've got a really good story, and I think I do. And it's basically all the components for everything I've been talking about for what was Legacy Beta, which is now, that's turned into Emergence, which is now Ascension because Cryptic used that name. And it's basically all coming together as one mission, and I'm really excited about building it because it's going to be a time travel plot. It's got elements of the distant future, well, near future from Star Trek Online's 26th century. It's got a personal character story, a lot more involvement from the player, and it's also got some crazy world building. Because the plot of that mission is going to be, it's your first time going out, or one of the first times going out, so early expedition phase, and you encounter 2 empires on the verge of war, and you will find out certain aspects of the conflict aren't what they appear to be. Specifically, someone may be trying to throw a roadblock into the expedition's path, so we don't find Earth. So we'll see how that one develops, and there's going to be some my first big attempt to really involve the player in a mission as making them a lot more central to the plot and the characters. So that should be an interesting go. So the main characters at this point is right now an Orion, who's involved in a lot of the temporal business. She will have an involvement with a player at some level, and to help the player sort through all the temporal mechanics and make nice first contact with the empires on the verge of war, we've also got now temporal agent Ross, and that will be fun because I'd put him in the role, but I need sort of like someone who can kind of take the player by the shoulder and like, here, no, you can't do that. That's a little bit more Ross. So but at the same time being able to just kind of walk into a antechamber and just say, hey, well, how's it going, to lead potentates of alien empires. So that should be a good one.
Kind of imagine he's the kind of person who nobody appointed him to the post, he just assumed it.
Actually, he was blackmailed into it. Daniels has something on Ross and basically said, you will be part of the 26th century expedition, or else people will find out about what you did. So he's there. He's the one who's there, who doesn't want to go, and he's trying to, part of his backstory is that he's trying to get back to the 25th century. So we kind of wrote that in for the intro plot, but that's probably not going to be too involved in the main plot here. He's just sort of going along with it, but at the same time, he's got some other resources that the player doesn't necessarily know about. And then from here on, this is sort of my first mission. I do have a second mission very strongly in mind, and I'll need this to finish off the plot. It's not sort of like a part 1, part 2, but just 2 connected episodes that finish off an arc. And on that one, I've just got one core idea, and I want to basically leave it general until I finish this other mission. But the core idea of this is that the IKS Dorgath, the Klingon flagship, gets lost, and we got to go find it.
Oh, great. Now another thing we got to go find.
We got to go find the Dorgath, because that might have, it might have done something. And I might set that mission before or after our finale, just kind of depends on timing. So that changes a little specific. Right?
I'm just thinking of a scene from the last Harry Potter book where, they're off on this quest and they got to find things, and then it turns up, one more thing they got to find, and, one of the characters just blows up. Another thing we got to find, and he storms off. You gotta have a scene like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, at the least at the very start, I can go ahead and do that.
But you could play it for comedy, though.
Well, yeah, and I've got plenty of characters to do that with. So I mean, including Ross, because he's a major comedy character of the SSF series.
So I'm kind of curious about something. Do you find working with a 26th century anthology, because it takes place so far from any of our established species or planets, do you find it liberating or challenging?
I find it challenging because it's actually a lot more constrained than what I was doing. Because what I did for AEI was the 4.5, 4.6 million year future. And that was really liberating, and I can go nuts. Now I'm coming back, so I'm working with the Fed, KDF, and Romulans as the base, and then I'm constrained on what I can do with those because it has to sort of make sense to 100 years in the future, or 100, 200 years in the future. And then I have on top of that the Centaurus A. So Centaurus A, that's been very liberating to work with, but it's kind of like going back. And it's been difficult to go through the established factions just because it's kind of that weird balance where it's liberating in parts, but you kind of don't know how to handle it in others. Kind of want to see how other people sort of go first, but you still have to make a first move. So
it's, with the established cultures, you're all still strangers there. You're strangers there together.
Yeah. And it's really, I think it's, as challenging as it might be, it is very rewarding because it does have this really great feel to it once you get those ideas going. And it really does feel, I think, for a 26th century, I think the premise is a really awesome way to handle it because it is, at the same time, it's an evolution forward, but it's not just around the same area. It's still doing something else, which allows us to take a new look at the old things, move them around. So it's just, I'm really liking this project now. Now that I kind of have a real good feel for how to write for it, how I'm going to be taking the characters, and what I ultimately want to tell with these stories. Because that's one of the things I did with the outlining process, just see what exactly am I trying to say here as just the thematic mission elements. What character story do I want to tell? And what points do I want to try to make? On top of just building a mission.
See, clearly I'm a genius for coming up with this idea.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this has been a good one. And Finding Earth, I mean, the Orion character that I showed off is I might make her full Orion, but right now I'm leaning on making her half Orion, half human. Father is human, mother's Orion, and they're both on Earth at this time.
It's an interesting phenomenon in coming up with characters for this anthology. You know, I put it out there to everyone on the forums to suggest characters. A lot of people went with mixed race characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are the most fun because
they
introduce unstable elements into the established races.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it's interesting. I think it's like it was just sort of an interesting collective trend in what people were suggesting, and it sort of translates to an overall trend of the galaxy maybe coming together, or, you know, our area of the galaxy coming together a little bit more.
Yeah,
and there's, you know, there's more crossbreeding between all of the different species, and it's an interesting sociological phenomena.
And I'll say it makes designing background NPCs really fun because you just got so many different ways of working it. Like, I'm going to make this person half Endorian, or a third, like 1/4 Endorian, 1/4 Denobulan, part Bajoran. You can just go nuts with this.
I had one. I had one bridge officer on my on one of my temporal characters that was from like a descendant from the future, where like it was like every single race you could possibly think of, like mixed into one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and that was kind of something that I think Daniels and Caldano, those characters sort of hinted at, is that, you know, by their time, which is much even further removed, that there really would be a lot of aliens in your heritage, even if you were maybe still mostly human.
Yeah. And it's a great way to look at culture, look at characters, designs. It's just everything's kind of coming together. And it does feel unique to the 26th century, that we are starting to see this and we can make a really strong point about it.
Mm-hmm. And you could also make a strong pushback against it, too, if you got a character who is actually a full-blooded Klingon. You know, maybe they're not happy with all this going on.
Yeah, but the Klingons, I kind of see it's something where, like, the core worlds are very still pure-blooded Klingon, and no fraternization with the what could be tomorrow's enemy. But then you get on the fringes and like in the colony worlds and stuff where the Klingon force of will is not so strong, and so you start to see more mixed races out there.
Yeah.
So Ranger Ryu has a question for us. It says, what happens to the President, the Federation Council, and the heads of Starfleet Command when Earth disappears? I don't know that we've actually established that, have we?
No.
No.
Are they on Earth, or are they not on Earth?
Presumably.
Oh, these are VIPs. Was there time to evacuate them?
I don't...
Maybe it's more fun if they were on Earth and they got whisked away with it.
Yeah, I'd say so. Just because it does put in some more unstable elements for who's taking over in the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
Because there might be, say, points of contention.
The Secretary of Agriculture is now the president back in the Milky Way.
Yeah. So I mean,
because he was off-world at the time.
Yeah. So there could be some push-pull. So that I'd say, let's go ahead and just say that the senior heads of, or at least the civilian heads, were on Earth, and there might have been some Starfleet commanders who were just operating at other Starfleet admirals operating at some other star bases, kind of like an Admiral Ross type thing, where he's not necessarily always on Earth. So we can see it like it's more kind of Starfleet as being sort of the senior heads now, or other civilian leaders. But yeah, just sort of say that we lost the elected heads of Starfleet on Earth. And there's some,
and you could have some plot lines with, you know, people being thrust into leadership positions that maybe they weren't ready for, or you know, when we're in the Centaurus galaxy, maybe you find someone from the political structure who is not with Earth for some reason, and you know, maybe they try and take command, and maybe they really shouldn't. You know,
could be like, say for example, you have a Tellarite or an officer who's appointed by a Tellarite admiral, who is trying to get a little bit more pull away from Sol-centric government. So he made this political appointee who is overseeing the operations and trying to push things in a different way because they want to basically establish themselves as more at the forefront of Starfleet. So you could just do a little bit of a push-pull between Sol and the rest of the Federation. And maybe there's certainly some statements you can make about that, one way or the other, whether or not you want to represent Sol as humanity or Sol as sort of a point of cultural mixing that people want to push back against. So, yeah, I mean, you could take it a lot of different ways. So I'd say, like, just leaving it up to people, see what they come up with would be very interesting.
And Bloodleaf makes a good point, is that we don't want to copy Battlestar Galactica too much. With the idea that, all the leadership is gone and somebody way down the line of succession becomes the president. And I think we could probably still hint at that, but I wouldn't bring him with us.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, what you could also do is just say, like, I mean, the Federation Council, I mean, they won't necessarily be on Earth at all times. So it could just be that the bulk of the Federation Council is still extant, that they weren't on Earth at the time.
So I've got a great idea. And it actually solves a second problem of when the shockwave is coming, why is it that you run away from Earth? And so what if, okay, so in our pilot, you're helping set up one of the shield generators, and when you get back, you're basically told, look, we've got some of the highest dignitaries in the on Earth that we need to get to safety, and your ship is like sent with them to get them out of the system. But obviously, even with the Enterprise J there, you're talking maybe 1,000 or two people that they can fit.
Yeah,
so it's still like only like the upper echelon.
Maybe they need you. They need your help to evacuate some of those VIPs.
Yeah,
doesn't have to be all of them. Could be some of them.
Just say like the Federation Council. Just kind of keep it simple like that. Federation Council and associated staff.
Because then that gives you a good example of why you're not sticking around with Earth under the protection of the shield.
Yeah.
And in that way, you can introduce a sort of civilian leader type character who will be involved in the decision to send the fleet out to look for Earth later on, representing the civilian leadership.
Kind of like I'd say one thing you could do is that say the president like says he's staying behind because he doesn't want to abandon Earth, and then the vice president leaves. So the vice president is the one who sends the fleet out.
Yeah, the vice president is the one that you evacuate.
His name's not Clark, is it?
or Kinsey?
That might be a little much.
A lot of nefarious vice presidents in television history, that's for sure. There were several on 24.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to go there exactly.
No, and it's a plot line that we can't really pursue because the story is really about Centaurus A. It's not about what's happening back in the Federation.
But it'd be good to have the civilian leadership involved in that decision to send out the fleet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about kind of having like a meet and greet sort of a conference room scene at the very end, where we get to meet like the captains of the 3 factional flagships and stuff like that. That would be a good place to kind of put him in there.
Yeah. It's a guy who's going to have like 5 lines throughout the whole thing. So,
but I like that the Federation president, in a show of solidarity, chooses to stay on Earth.
Or in a show of political bravado.
That is for minds higher than ours to debate.
So in thinking about these anthology series, which we've had good luck with so far, I kind of came up with an idea for another one, which is Discovery related.
Uh-oh.
So
I'm already committed to 2 more missions. Come on.
Okay, so without spoiling anything about Discovery, I mean, all of the material out there tells that it involves a conflict with the Klingons from way back in pre-TOS days. It only shows a limited perspective on that conflict. So I think there's more stories to tell from that Federation Klingon War. So whenever we get some Discovery content, we need the ships, we need, the new Klingon customization, we need the uniforms in the Foundry. Whenever we get that, having an anthology of Klingon war stories could be fun. From a pre-TOS world.
Coming 2018.
Everything's a little more primitive. It's a little more Wild West. Could be some fun opportunities there. But yeah.
that would be tough because it is so far in the past.
I think it's just another opportunity for folks with obviously, if you pan your camera around, we see Bloodleaf, who is wearing a Discovery uniform at the time, right now. So, it's an opportunity for people to RP as Discovery era captains. So, another one of those opportunities that we have in the Foundry to tailor missions to specific eras if we want to. And there's even more we can do.
Yeah.
There's areas we haven't touched on.
I'm actually thinking about making a slight nod to Discovery in 26th Century by one of the new factions I'll be developing. They'll have mycelial transwarp drive. I won't say how that works yet, but it's something that they've got. They've got the technology working, and it's stable, and I'm going to have to be vague about why it... about why the Federation doesn't use it anymore, but...
You're going to be so screwed if at the end
frankly,
of season
we don't
1,
know that yet.
mycelial network is destroyed.
Well, it's Centaur's I'll be safe.
Oh,
even
you think
if
it's
okay?
okay?
Up there.
Yeah, it could still. It's if Duncan wants it to exist,
it grew back.
It grew back.
It
got better.
I was just pining for the fjords. Anyway, yeah, I mean, they're introducing new tech, and we can, implement it in Star Trek. So that, you can start bringing in some aspects of the Fed being a little bit more dramatic and a little bit less, oh yes, cheerio, let's go do it. We'll have tea ready. You could just kind of make it like a little bit more diverse in terms of admiral infighting, project infighting, stuff like that. And then definitely for the Klingons, you can go into full depth on those guys with a little bit more of what we've seen in Discovery. Just more different, more free license to make them a little bit different between factions and different cultural styles, at the very least. So yeah, there's a lot of fun things you can do. And like a Klingon sort of war story thing. You can do it as a time travel. You can do it as a holodeck. Kind of like Azurian's Battle of Clactical Bra.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely... And we may be able to leave it more open than we did with 26th Century. Yeah. In that maybe we don't bother to explain or let the authors kind of choose.
The holodeck idea appeals to me. Of having, look, somebody uncovered a cache of Discovery-related holo programs. Let's play them.
He used to record everything as holograms back then.
Except they had to get actors to play, Captain Giorgio and all that, so they don't look like how they looked like back in the whatever century.
The other thing we could just do is just say it was a big conflict, just involve other captains.
Yeah, and that was my idea, is, just tell other stories from the war that didn't involve the Discovery per se.
Yeah.
Kind of like we did with the a little bit with the Iconian War. We all branched out and told different stories from different areas in the war. Obviously still involving the player character, but
it's funny when we were discussing this over on Discovery Roundtable. I was totally thinking this is just like the Iconian War, where we hear about the war all the time and see very little of it. Yeah.
But we won't spoil too much of Discovery for anybody in our viewership who has not watched it. We do our Discovery Roundtable as well on our YouTube channel, so check that one out. We'll have a new one soon.
Real quick point. Heathen Dog in our chat brings up a very interesting point of something that a player could do for a Klingon war story, the Romulan perspective.
Yeah, so there was the Earth-Romulan War, which has been alluded to by episodes, but it was never shown. It was something that was going to be shown on Enterprise
So you can say that.
On.
So I'm not necessarily saying that like the Earth Romulan War, because that was history. I'm thinking Discovery era Romulans, because we know that they've got the Talis at this point. They might. Oh crap! They don't have warp drive though.
Okay, so that one you've really just got to throw out the window because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that one doesn't make any sense.
there are certain things. Yeah. There are certain things in TOS that you gotta take with a grain of salt.
Okay, yeah, and then Enterprise,
which is exactly the conversation that we just had last night with PAX when we were doing recording the latest Discovery Roundtable. Because Discovery is not at this point going to depict Romulans. They've said that the word Romulan is not allowed in the writer's room. Basically because I think Balance of Terror was meant to be the end of a long period of isolation between the Federation and the Romulan Empire.
Yeah, so there's definitely no going around that one. But I'm just saying is that you could do a mission that, say for example, there's a temporal incident and there are Romulans discovered in the past, and it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And it could just be that it's Romulan expedition, or something involving them. So anyway, it's just another perspective.
And I have a vague thought in my mind that, when Cryptic starts putting in ships from Discovery, they may make up their own Romulan ship.
Yeah, as they did for the Kelvin timeline.
Exactly. Yeah. They may come up with their own original designs because, they're
good at that.
Otherwise would get criticized for not having anything for the Romulan faction.
Yeah, and I guess it's fun for those guys too. So
sure, why not?
Yeah, so we've seen it with also with the the Thry Warbird, the additional TOS design.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
there's lots of possibilities for sort of lost eras of Star Trek. If you're interested in what that Federation Romulan War from way back when, I recommend getting its book called Federation: The First 150 Years. It delves into that quite a bit, and that's where I got the I've got a little Foundry mission out, or it would be out if it weren't for downtime, called Starbase 1 Memorial, where I built a starbase that was destroyed in the Romulan War, and I have it like it's rebuilt as a museum.
I like how Johnny Snowballs were just walking around, just
doing weird British things.
He's right behind you.
He's right behind you. This is not Halloween, Johnny. Anyway, Dragoon, you had an idea for an activity we could do.
Yes, something of a bit of a tech topic, actually.
Indeed.
I mean, I was going to call it in the Foundry, but
we should come up with a fancy graphic for our tech topics.
I'm always up for coming up with fancy graphics.
And I'm always up for making you come up with fancy graphics.
Yeah. Just so long as you don't ask me for a fancy graphic, because you'll know how I'll go with that.
All right.
So, tell us what you got.
Okay, so obviously with the Foundry down, there's not a whole lot we can do to push forward our missions, but I know in multiple occasions in the past we've often suggested writing Foundry Dialog, because you can do that in a word processor, and you don't need the Foundry up to really do it, and it does shave off quite a bit of time in your development. But the challenge is that Foundry Dialog is branching and has a flowchart kind of structure to it that is really kind of hard to represent outside of the Foundry, and especially in like a word processor, which isn't designed to really display information that way. So I am actually going to pull up Super Secrets, part of the dialogue script for part 3.
And just as a joking aside here, I just want like Zero to come on the stream right now and just see us working in a Word document and just scream at that moment, look at what you guys have reduced us to. Without the Foundry, we're just explaining Word documents. But this is useful because this is just a great way to at least look at dialogue by itself and see how it's working. And I definitely use similar methods myself, although I kind of just do a little bit sort of more quick and dirty rather than doing the full setup. So I'm interested to see what you got going here.
So let me first off by saying this is a site called Zoho, ZOHO.com. And it's similar in a similar vein to like Google Docs or whatever Microsoft calls their mobile version of Word, the online version. But unlike those two things, this word processor has one extra feature, and that is that you can split cells in tables, which the more strict or trimmed down versions of like Google Docs won't let you do. You've got to have uniform tables in it. So, yeah, so you can split cells here, and it'll actually split two cells. So you can kind of get an asynchronous. So then, let's say I want to have two responses, and go ahead and get rid of these real quick.
1, attack. 2, don't attack.
Yeah.
Dialogue. Hello, player. How are you today? Option 1. I'm great. How are you? Option 2. F off.
I'm just going to say we are probably pretty rusty at writing dialogue at this point.
And so what you can do is then any dial or line rows that you add in after that are going to be separated into two things. And so I can write a response for so I can write different dialogues based on your action. This can now represent two different responses.
Mm-hmm. You can keep branching off.
Yeah, and you can subdivide it quite several times. So what I tend to keep them at like half the width of the page just to kind of keep it in a more readable format. But then if I have to start like spreading it out, I'll expand it to the full side of the page so I can have more space to separate out. So yeah, so we got this here, and I apologize, I'm not quite formatting things. I tend to like to try and format it, so I'll like do a little italic for titles. I didn't used to originally bother including titles, but I found it's kind of become more worth doing. It just because A, it makes it easier to follow and see who's talking, and B,
when I'm doing my writing, sometimes I'll include full names. Sometimes I'll also, like right at the start, like what I'll do is just use the bullet system. So I'll have one dialogue option from one character. The next, hit enter, get the next to a bullet. Then I'll indent that to a different level, and then that level corresponds to that character, and I've just got a list at the top listing in order who's who. And I guess that's just, it's a very quick way of writing dialogue. But at the same time, it does it's basically, it doesn't necessarily look, it looks different. So I'll often find that I'll have to change dialogue once I see it in the text box because it's different formatting, different kind of context, and seeing it in just a single line versus seeing it work out. So it does take some modification, but I like that what you've got going on here because it does still feel like you're writing in the editor. So you kind of get a better feel for how it's going to play out.
And if you guys want to work on it more offline, what is it? I believe there's a program called Open Docs or like OpenOffice? It's part of
OpenOffice is one version. There's also an updated version called LibreOffice, and that's what I use. If I don't have Microsoft Word. So LibreOffice, Libre Office. And it's just OpenOffice. It's just a derivation of it. And I like it because I think OpenOffice, they're not... last I heard, they weren't doing any more updates for that because all that got transferred to LibreOffice.
Okay. But at the very least, there is a free version.
Yes. And
we had a question.
Yeah?
Sorry. Do you guys ever try and speak your words out loud? You know, try and say the lines, see if they make sense?
I will sometimes do that. Not like, full pronunciation, but sometimes I'll just read through it. I've been doing that more lately because I know people are live streaming Legion of Myth and possibly Cryptic. So, it does help at the very least sort of make something flow. But at the same time, when you're reading it, you don't necessarily have the same constraints, so there's a little bit less pressure.
It's a common technique that I remember being taught that is something you could do back when I was in college doing creative writing classes. But it's not something that I tend to do. What I like to do is I like to imagine actors speaking the lines.
So it's funny you should mention that. I actually I will imagine a scene from TNG with a bridge staff sitting around the conference room, and I will run my dialogue through their mouths to see how well it fits
in your mind.
I've basically got that running for my own creative stuff. So I don't necessarily have to retranslate it back to Star Trek. I just have my own imagination for how this would play out. So I do have character voices, and that's basically how I read a lot of these optional dialogues, just very intuitively. There's Admiral Aaron.
They're all variations of my voice.
I should say that I do this for bridge officer dialogue specifically because they are these blank slates that I need to make sound sort of Star Trek-y. And so usually
if you can imagine Picard and Co.
dialogue is pretty sterile. And so you could get a lot of lines that would fit pretty well into Geordi's. So I'll picture like Geordi explaining something and kind of how would he explain this thing that I'm writing, or Worf giving a tactical update, or Data explaining some sort of scientific phenomena off the starboard bow, that sort of thing.
It's great for technobabbles to try and imagine the actual characters from Star Trek saying it.
Yeah.
But one thing that Bloodleaf brings up is that some people are writing in a language that is not necessarily their native language. So I think maybe in that case, one of the best things to do might be to try and get somebody else to read it. Not necessarily out loud, but show them your script and have them read through it. So say, can you help me out with this? Get an editor essentially.
Yeah.
And that's could be helpful for any of us, even if we are writing in our native language.
Yeah. I know, just because he did, Admiral Aaron just came up because he does have a script editor for his missions. So, and those are very, very well polished when they come out. So it does definitely pay off because every time I make mine, it's basically I release my mission, and then I've got about a dozen minor updates right afterwards, just as I work through, play it through, see all the dialogue from the player perspective. Because for me, it's a little bit easier to locate typos that way than just scanning through, because I've written it so much, I've read it so much that I'll just read over stuff that
you know what it's supposed to say.
I know what it's supposed to say.
So your mind will skip over things that in favor of what it's supposed to say.
Yeah, and I've even had members of my fleet in Star Trek Online test through missions, and it's still funny that we can all play through something, and something in the main dialogue will slip through. And it's something we've all seen. We definitely have all seen it for critical plot points, but it's just like, oh, wait a minute, major typo, and then I'll see that pop up in a review a few months later. It's like, oh, come on.
And that's one of the reasons I recommend doing this, even if the Foundry wasn't down, is that spell check. These things have spell check.
They do have spell check. Yeah. And I'll actually...
Now, spell check doesn't always save you, but...
No, but it'll
certainly help you out.
It'll help.
Another strategy is just to actually, if you have a big chunk of dialogue and you really want to be sure on that one, you can copy it out, paste it in Word, check it, and then paste it immediately back. So you can still, for me, I just find writing in the editor sort of more organic, I get a real much better feel for it because I can sort of play around with things a lot more quickly and see how it works. But at the same time, I've got Word open, and then I'm just transferring things back and forth just to see, okay, is this good? Is it good? And sometimes it still misses stuff because sometimes the grammar's off.
And the other nice thing about this is that you can compose dialogue when you may otherwise not have good access to the Foundry.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to go right in a coffee shop, you can go do that.
and you also have access to it. I mean, even after the mission is done, if you for some reason can't access the mission, you can go look at your script. Yeah. It's there. All the stuff is there. I ran into wanting to have this because you, Duncan, wanted to know what was the name of the ship that the player had to the Federation ship that the player had to destroy in Purity 6. I wrote that whole mission in the Foundry, so consequently I did not have the script where I could access it because it was downtime. Or it wasn't down. It was because the mission itself hadn't come up from the last downtime.
Yeah, and you couldn't get into it because it was spotlighted.
Yeah, so what I did is I found somebody's playthrough of it and watched it.
This actually came up for me, and it's kind of a shame that Heathen Dogs left, because this is how I originally discovered Legion of Myth, was that I was looking for one of the species names in Trident. I just completely forgot it. I'm just like, oh, well, I'll see if someone's done a live stream, because I think that was during Foundry Downtime, and I wanted to I wanted to have that for organizing some screenshots. And I found Legion of Myth's playthrough of Trident, and that's how I caught up on that group. So it sometimes can come up, like some things, some happy circumstances can come out of that.
Playthroughs are watching somebody play through your mission and reading all the dialogue out loud is just immensely valuable.
Oh yeah, and those guys have been so helpful, and I hope other authors are really paying attention to what they're doing, because they do play through it very well, very thoughtfully. And you can see them responding to plot points too, and just to see how the story beats are working. And that's been really great to see, and that's really refined how I've approached, because I've seen them run through Starfleet Security now. So I kind of know what worked, and I kind of know what didn't. I feel a lot more comfortable thinking about that. And that's part of the reason why my latest Starfleet Security mission is just my absolute favorite mission I've ever made. Because there's a lot, like what it's doing and what I want it to do are very closely in sync. And that's largely thanks to seeing how people respond to missions, so I can better calibrate myself to what they're doing. So definitely take advantage of that. And Doug Glendower has been doing a bunch of Foundry reviews as well. So you can see it from an author's, he gives an author's perspective, a little drier, but definitely very insightful at the end when he gives that full review.
So something else that I really like to do when I have a script like this is that towards the end of a mission, when I'm getting ready to release, I'll start doing playthrough tests where I'll go through and like check to make sure everything's working smoothly and things are actually coming out across the way I thought they would. And invariably, as I'm going through that, I will start to catch typos. So what I will actually do is I will make edits. So maybe the question mark is missing on this line, and so I'll add it in, but then what I'll do is I'll highlight it.
So you can go through that one.
So basically then I'll go back into the editor and then start running through my script, watching for the highlights. It's like, oh, there's an edit I need to make. Go back into the editor, make the edit, and I can just kind of keep track of all the edits to the dialogue I need to make.
That's a good idea.
And that's very precise, because what I have to do is basically I've got a separate notepad running. And I'll make very precise I'll make notes that I'll understand for what I need to go fix. So I have that running during my playtests, and that includes all typos, and I can locate it pretty easily because I've got a pretty good memory. But sometimes it is difficult to make sure that you get through absolutely everything. So that's a good method, because you just have everything right there. So yeah,
that's actually what Dragoon is showing here, where you highlight the text, is actually exactly a technique that we use in. I think you all know that I work for a newspaper. I'm a newspaper editor, and we have a company of 6 newspapers. And something we do whenever somebody is editing your text, if they make a change or if they have a question on something, they'll do exactly that. They'll highlight the text in that way so that it stands out and it draws your eye. You know that, okay, there's, this person has a question here that I need to answer, or, they made a change here that I need to make sure that that's a good change.
Yeah, and I'll do it too when I'm writing my science papers, like just things that's like, okay, I need to work on this, need to work on that. I will use that, like highlighting does, make sure you don't forget it.
Mm-hmm. Johnny Snowball brings up a good idea. Is you can also use colors and highlights and things like that to mark when something is completed. Mm-hmm. And mark when something is maybe has been actually put into the Foundry. Once you've copied your text over, you can turn it gray or something that indicates that you have copied that over. And so that way, if you need to make a change to that paragraph, you're going to have to do it in the editor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of word processors, including Word and Google Docs and this, will allow you to add comments to things too. So
that
like
works. Yeah.
And then you can just kind of skip through and see all the things. And then, yeah, I mean, in this case, and I think it works in the same way in most of those, you can actually mark them as resolved once you make the change.
And something we've done with Google Drive is, we've been able to, you can open up your document where somebody can make comments on it like that. Without actually changing any of the text. So, they can say, on this line and such, you need to, change is to are, and that sort of thing. So, something like Google Docs is a good way if you need somebody to take a look at your mission.
Cool.
So, one thing that I thought would be fun to do tonight is to kind of show everybody sort of, I call it the inner sanctum, which is basically my Google Drive full of all kinds of, basically like every Foundry thing I've ever done utilizing the Google Drive is in there. So let me...
let's hope this works.
Screen share.
Yeah, I've got actual physical folders with that type of information in there. Although I do have some stuff on Google Drive, but yeah, dude, I still do a lot of stuff on local.
All right, Dragoon, you got that?
Yep, you're up.
Okay. So this is my Star Trek Online folder. In it, I have some random things like Surikata's blank map when they redid the sector space. And then this nifty wallpaper version. And then I also have a version of Dragoon's little bridge that he created so that you can recreate that if needed to. And this one, which is something I'm not sure I ever talked about on the show that I did. So, there's always, since Star Trek Online began, there was this thing about, 2 years or 1 year is really not enough time for a cadet to be promoted to an admiral. So I wanted to extend the timeline out a little bit, using the missions and using maybe sort of a more realistic rank progression. So I counted backwards from 2410 based on sort of the general amount of time that modern day officers spend at each rank. So from 2410, I got us all the way back towards 2371, which is so basically, if you went like this, if you wanted to end your character's timeline in the present day of Stowe, which is 2410, basically you would be a young officer during the Dominion War.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be in your 50s and 60s probably.
That's interesting, because that's actually that's pretty much exactly what I've got for Commander Ross's backstory.
Yeah, it's actually a backstory I also used for an admiral, that he was a young fighter pilot in the Dominion War.
Yeah.
Now you could go the other way as well, which is to start your character's cadet career in 2409 and then go forwards. So you'd be about, in the 2450s or 2460s.
Yeah.
By the time of, the Future Proof and New Frontiers arcs that we're in now.
Interesting way it would be interesting, like, to move your character on a little bit, just do a little bit of a visual update every 10 levels, make your character just look a little bit older.
So one thing I'll show everybody first before I go into Foundry stuff is this is my crazy spreadsheet for all my characters. So I've got the character names. Yeah, I've got the class, what weapon type they're using, what spec they are. I haven't bothered to fill in all of those. What species they are, if they're a role-playing crew or just, regular or whatever show crew. All the ships that they're using, all of the rep that they've completed. And
wow.
In progress and pending T5s, because, you have to go through a mission to actually claim the Romulan T5s, and some of these I've been too lazy to actually do that. And then at the end, some of them have crafting as well.
That is some very serious Star Trek onlining.
I had to do something to keep it all straight.
Because otherwise you can't. Like, for me, I've got 6 characters, and it does take... Like, that's basically my limit of just handling on the fly. I can't really do more.
Mm-hmm. And here's the other thing, is this is another piece of user-generated content that you could do when the Foundry is down, is bios for your characters. There's a place in your character window where you can put in your biography if you wanted to, and people can go read it. And there are people who actually do like to go read it. I've had 2 or 3 people, PM me, and they say, I was just reading your bio. That's totally awesome. I have not made it for all my characters yet, but a good chunk.
That's something to do. Yeah.
And so I just type it here and then copy paste. All right, so Foundry stuff. All right, here's my massive folder of random Foundry stuff. Okay, so I had folders for like this is the last Photonomy, the big Starbase UGC mission series that we did. Had some screenshots that people were using. I believe I did have a script for that. Yeah, there it is. Oh, and this was actually we came up with a template for the very end text. So you got thanks for playing, and then you got all the names of the various people who made missions. So if you're doing a collaborative series of some kind, or some of us have taken to putting sort of boilerplate language at the end of all our missions that lists our other missions and things like that. So you can have a file with that in your Google Drive or on your computer, so that you don't have to type that out each time.
I've been typing that out each time, and I realize I've been an idiot for doing so.
Yeah, idiot.
And then I had to keep updating it too for all my missions.
All right. Okay. So here's some stuff from all of our different polls that we've done over the years, like the map request. Here was the winners. We really want like New Romulus Command and that sort of stuff.
Empty. Oh, we got the empty map.
We did get the empty map.
Huzzah!
Mm-hmm. The nice thing about Google is that you can actually do polls right on Google.
Oh, cool.
So like here was the ground costume request poll.
See what we got here.
It's called Google Forms is how this one is. So it goes all the way from, actually this is a really old one because it has Bajoran militia uniforms, which I believe we do have in the Foundry.
Yep, we do. Fleet NBC robes, we do. We got the mine.
Mm-hmm.
We have Undine Battletech, Herodian armor, Gem Hadar, sunglasses.
We got a good chunk of this stuff.
Yeah, most of it. We don't have the let's see. I think we don't have the EV suits as custom uniforms.
We don't have them as custom uniforms.
We do have them as
Which, having seen how those things hook up, you want them as stock NPCs, not as custom. They're tricky.
Yeah.
So there is some stuff in here that we still don't quite have access to.
Swimwear. We don't have much swimwear. And that's actually, I think that was the major one.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. Also in here is a thing that is always important to link is the master list for the Iconian war missions. I have everybody put their details in there. That is sitting on my list here. Okay, so here's a fun one. Here's a little map that I came up with. Because I had this idea of doing some missions set 200,000 years ago, right after the fall of the Iconians. It would be like, all these new powers rising and new political landscape, and you would somehow thrust the player into that. So you would have, the Ikabar and the Denazians, and then a couple other races that I'd come up with, and then you'd have the Voth. And I thought it'd be fun to have, at this point, the Voth maybe were in control of the space around Earth.
I like the Horta.
Yeah, the Horta's over there. I thought, maybe the Horta were like a trading culture or something.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. I've done similar things with original sci-fi. Just trying to specify stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is actually a very fun exercise.
Yeah.
With how far you can go with that.
Yeah, here's another thing. I was trying to visualize some things in an interior, exactly how I would put it together. And this is something that you can do in, a computer program or just on a piece of paper. Draw something out. So I had, an entrance hallway here. And then you would go up into, this is going to be like a nightclub or something. You'd go up into the main nightclub here, and then there's this little platform here that you could go out on that had chairs and stuff as well. And then there would be a big open space down here. It would be like floating above that.
I did similar things for the Halo Forge back in the day for Halo 3.
Mm-hmm.
Although I haven't done that with the Foundry yet. Because I always play by feel on my builds.
Yeah. So here's another fun thing that you can do when the Foundry is down is you can create, lore documents or lore blogs for things going on. So this was something that I believe somebody was requesting documents for one of their Foundry missions. Like if you were browsing through a library computer, you just needed random documents. I think it might have been Paul Sutherland.
No, that was me.
That was you?
Yeah,
okay.
I was.
Might have been you.
Well, he might have done something earlier, but for what I've done recently, I've actually put the call out for a library, and I've also put up a creative writing thread. And I think that's where you posted this into that.
I might have.
Yeah. So definitely, creative writing is like short story writing is a great way to spend downtime, and that's something I've been trying to get back into a little bit more recently. Haven't been able to. I started writing an original sci-fi thing, and that kind of petered out. And now I'm thinking about, okay, I'll get back to writing SSF because there's some stuff I want to set up for my next mission. But that just got dark. So it's just like, I write a happy story, not like a depressing story where one of the characters has a breakdown. Although that is kind of, I do want to push in a certain direction, and I do need to push one of the characters over the edge a little bit. So we'll see.
Well, this one was kind of a fun exercise in talking about what happened after the mission was over. And basically, the results of a Starfleet inquiry into the events that happened in the mission, specifically the mission Sink the Bismarck, where an AI takes over a ship and goes on a rampage. So I had it becoming of no punitive action was taken against the admiral in charge of everything. Although I kind of always figured that her reputation was mud after that. Let's see here. Have some show notes. Have the names that I came up with for my Bajoran metal band.
The
Spoon Haters.
Starfar Theta recently asked me and Paul Stelliland on our chat thread. It's basically what he does instead of Twitter. Although I keep asking, Starfar Theta, get on Twitter. It'll be fun. But anyway, he came up with the idea of like for Stowe characters and Foundry characters, who would you do for we ultimately also turned into a metal band. And yeah, we had a pretty fun time coming up with that. We put Tardy on drum, Lieutenant Tardy on drums.
Maybe the Spoon Haters could open for your band.
Yeah, maybe. We put Empress Sidothe from Sutherland's Mirror War series. She's lead singer. Jagoro's backup vocals. Atalanta from Omnitabula is lead guitar. And then I think it's... Oh, no, Ross... I think Itrex is on bass. And then Commander Ross and Enigma, the malicious computer AI, are roadies. So yeah, just fun little creative exercises.
Oh, yeah.
Great way to pass downtime.
Mm-hmm. So in this folder, I've got various different things. So here's our folder for 26th century stuff.
Woo!
Here's something that I showed to Dragoon. This is basically an idea for a mission patch, which is I'm hoping at some point he'll make for me.
Crap, I completely forgotten about that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do I have to send you any more dialogue?
I don't remember. I'm going to have to sit down and take stock of all that and write what's missing and get what's not from everybody.
I'll be honest, I have not thought about 26th century in about 6 weeks.
So here's another thing. So I on a previous show I told that I was going to make some like very basic, almost like patrols almost. I call them base missions, and I came up with sort of 10 ideas for missions that would be like 4 maps or less.
Yeah.
And I kind of was looking through one of my favorite things to do, which is look through the 70s sci-fi Twitter account.
Yes. Yes.
for random things to base missions on, like this nifty space station, or this starship crashed on an alien planet. Here's my outline, my very basic outline of missions, which are all based on Iron Maiden song titles. I thought this one was neat. With I don't know, maybe it has something to do with asteroids heading towards a planet. Maybe you have to save a planet.
Maybe save the asteroids.
I thought this would be cool. Something to do with water. Have towers rising out of the water for a map. A lost city in the mountains. Kind of reminds me of Mountains of Madness. If anyone's familiar with Lovecraft. Funky space station. This is kind of a neat one where it's got these like platforms that grow up from the ground, and that's where your cities are.
Yeah. It'd be kind of cool to do a Cloud City type thing where it's like inside a gas giant.
Well, funny you should mention that, because the next one is kind of like that.
Cloud City and Clouds.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it was just figuring out random things. So I'm going to show you guys a sample script here. This is how I do things. So I've got sort of the starting summary here, and then it starts with the first dialogue, and then I just basically do it very linear, with just the one path of dialogue response, and then I figure out any branching that I want to do later on in the Foundry. So it comes off looking a little bit more like a linear story, because that's the path that I want the player to follow. And then afterwards I can build in some branches, although usually they'll probably all just lead back to the same thing. Unless I'm purposefully trying to do some branching. Let me see if I've got... Okay, so if we go back out here, I've got my main Foundry script area. And something that I did that I have not updated in a long time is I made a spreadsheet of all my characters that I had in missions. You had which mission they appeared in, what species they were, their current rank, their affiliation, friend, enemy, and status being either dead or alive. Basically, this is so I know who I'd killed off. And their current assignment, and some of these, some of these are, they went to places that I hadn't actually published. or missions that I never actually gotten around to doing. Let's see here. I've got here. This is the Hollow History Starbase 1 script. When I first started this Starbase 1 mission, I had the idea of making it where you would be going through like a holodeck program of the actual attack on Starbase 1. So, it involved the USS Excalibur, an NX class, and I also listed the maps. One thing that's kind of useful to do is when you figure out how many maps you miss, you start listing your maps and start figuring out exactly what each one needs to be. Because you see, I already know that I'm going to need a duplicate of the first map and another duplicate of the first map later on that I changed to have like destroyed buildings. I know that I'm going to need an interior, ground interior, ground interior, ground interior, interior. And, you get to a certain point with the Foundry where you kind of know these things. You kind of know that when you start coming up with the mission idea, you say, okay, so I need a space map, then I think maybe a ground map, then an interior, then a space. And any preparation you can do beforehand, it definitely gets you to do things easier. Here's another good one. Oh, not actually that one. I need this one. Okay, so I created a Mako squad for a mission. And so I wrote all of them out with all their nicknames, all their ranks, all of their what species they are, and what nickname they had, because, I figured, more like an army unit, everyone's going to have a nickname. So I wrote all of that, and most of that is not necessarily going to be used in the mission, but it's good for me to have it, so I have it as a reference. So I know that I made a 14-man Mako team, which has a headquarters squad and then 2 shooter squads. And within that, you had I based this all on special forces, so I had an element leader who's going to be a sergeant, and then you had some critical skills operators, and then a corpsman or a medic of some kind. So, it's all about what can you do outside of the Foundry to make your Foundry life a bit easier. So, yeah, that's all my crazy stuff that I've collected over the how many years has Foundry been out? 6, 7?
Yeah, I don't know, because we hit the 7th anniversary. But yeah, what was the exact time?
The 7th anniversary? I thought we were only on 6.
Okay.
I think next one is the 7th, and
I honestly don't remember.
Okay, yeah, it could be next one is 7th, and then last one 6th. Yeah, that sounds right. I'm bad at dates.
So yeah, I mean that I just like, and in there is a whole ton of Foundry missions and scripts that I've started and not completed. Because me, I'm a start many projects, finish few sort of guy.
Yeah, right. And I'm getting to be a little bit more on that side too, just with the fact that I have, just over the last year, basically worked through a lot of different project ideas, which have gone various places. Some which may come back, some may not. We'll see. Yeah. So, did Dragoon have anything?
Yeah, I can show some if you want.
Because I've got a few things.
Your inner sanctum.
Yeah. Because I've got a few things that we can finish up with, but yeah, definitely if Dragoon wants to put some stuff up.
Hang on. Okay, and here I'm going to share with you guys so you can actually see in real time. All right, so this is my Foundry projects folder on Google Drive. Obviously, I've got a few things on Also on Zoho Docs, it's not very well organized. So I mean, I got a few things. I got the Captain Proton outline that I did a while back. Definitely, I'll have to revisit that at some point. Let's see. I got some team bios for. I think I compiled for Sir Boulevard because he wanted to use some of my characters in his missions, so I compiled this for him. It's basically just the dialogue from your interactions with them.
That's something that you can do when the Foundry's down is write biographies for your characters. It's not something you ever might need to use in a mission, but it's always good to have them there. It gets you're able to get to know your characters better.
Okay, well this is non-relevant because it ended up these actually didn't work. I think this is the
yeah, we were helping out Primar making a bridge.
Yeah, and so I ended up compiling the list of coordinates for him for that. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
After that you get into Shadow of Midas stuff. There's a ton of stuff from part 1 and part 2. My part 3 progress calculator. I was trying to figure out how to calculate my total progress overall, and so I came up with this elaborate formulas for you can kind of see all of them here. Figuring out, because it not only does it like it kind of, you got the different categories which are divided into weights, with the biggest one being map building, but then you've got the complexity of the map. So map 3 is way more complex than map 5, and so obviously that one's going to take longer. So then it calculates all the individual map completions and then runs it through a weighting thing until you finally spit out a number, which is really not all that far. So yeah, that was an afternoon of doing something really silly. Well, this is drawings for one of the maps in part 3, which I'm sure I've shown off at some point.
Yeah, you've shown that one off. That was, yeah, because you've got the that arc in conference room, which I really liked, and then the perspective too, of making sure that the you've got those sight lines spec'd out pretty well.
Yeah, so yeah, this is the stellar cartography, and the walls drop to allow you to basically see stars. But I needed the wall at the back to obscure any view of the corridors behind it. So I had to build in this cone. What do I got here? This is an early draft of the refugee city. Obviously, it ended up being almost nothing like this. But the idea was you had a beam-in point, you had a government building of some kind, and then you had to chase through some passageways to finally cut off. And obviously that got more refined as I went on. Lots of little things. I mean, there's part 1 stuff and part 2 stuff in here too. Agamemnon Bridge I built, which I shared with everybody. So technically this is the same version that's in Drogon's folder. Ooh, then I got the Foundry Ideas folder. So this is ideas that I thought, oh, wouldn't that be a cool mission? And I can't do it right now because I'm working on part 3. So let's see, beneath the cracked surface. So this was going to be my attempt for the Mirror Universe Romulan contest, and I actually kind of got a bunch of ideas out, but ended up not pursuing it because I realized that I was just not going to be able to do all this in the time span needed by the contest. And after that, I was like, is it really worth still doing? But yeah, I had this whole plan to basically rebuild, have like a recreation of the Romulan capital from Romulus. Let's see what else we got. What is? Some of these I haven't
Sometimes you
looked
don't
at in
even
quite a
remember.
while. Yeah, sometimes it's been quite a while. Okay, so this is actually an idea for a Klingon mission.
Charge of the Dead.
Yeah, so it's basically made for a Klingon captain who basically finds himself at death's door. And it's basically kind of this near-death experience that they kind of go through, and they're trying to get out of Grethor while they're in the real world. They're trying to recover, or you're like in critical condition. So it's kind of like Tapestry, except for Klingons.
Yeah, like any number of TV shows have done that kind of plot. Yeah.
So yeah, that's like the one good Klingon story idea I've had, which I know we need more of those.
I was thinking for a while of actually doing a sort of condensation of the entire SSS arc as a single Klingon mission. Just kind of take the opportunity to build something for the Klingons, kind of retell SSF, and just challenge myself to do it in one go. Everything down in one. And there's actually a story I could do that with. And it'd be pretty interesting, and I might revisit that idea sometime in the future.
I've got it. I have it. It's perfect. It's like a one map mission.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so go way back to the beginning. First time you set in your very first Foundry mission. First time you set foot on the EB planet, and you meet Jigoro. You just shoot her, and then bam, it's over.
Just watch time collapse around you or something.
Because that just like that one catalyst, or that one event was the catalyst that drove your entire plot forever.
Yeah, basically. And actually, the one thing I've actually would do is that it would actually be completely non-compatible, because the way I would redo SSF now that I didn't do, and I basically have completely rolled out, and kind of came up in refraction a little bit. I revisited the idea, and then afterwards, just like, oh, that actually would have been great for the original mission. That the clone is Undine. So, and that's basically why the process works, is that she's actually she's unknowingly an Undine infiltrator. And then I would basically bring in the Conclave from the subsequent missions and bring them into the first. So it'd actually be, the way I approach this is actually be a remake of my second mission, and just taking off the character as stated in the first mission. So Gemini would go through just fine, as it was already stated. But it would turn out that the clone, like Jigoro, was Undine. And then that would be the key dynamic of her versus Ilium. And actually have it be a Conclave versus Undine fight there, too. So, ways to do it. and one of it could just be, player might try to shoot her at some point.
It's funny you should mention that, because the last one in here is actually the concept that I know we talked about once a long time ago on the show of the player captain is an Undine infiltrator. And this is on the top of my list of if missions I want to do after part 3 is done. This is like the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I always like that idea of, and what you would do is you keep the player in the dark about it.
Oh yeah, they don't know they're in it.
You just keep running into things where suddenly you're not allowed to be in that area. People are viewing you with suspicion, and it's just getting really, really weird. It's like that episode of DS9 where it turns out O'Brien's a robot.
A great optional dialogue for that one would be the player starts to react against people, sort of keeping a little bit more distance, and basically the line comes up, "What am I, O'Brien?"
Well, I wanted to have like a whole scene where you have to escape from Earth's space dock, and so you actually go out to your ship to steal it. So you like cross the gangwalk, and I figured if I position it close enough that you can't really tell what kind of ship it is, can make it work.
All you can see is a little bit of hull.
And then what happens is I actually spawn you inside of the dock, of our space dock, and there's another ship there that's trying to stop you, and have to like do battle with this ship inside the dock, like where you have little room to maneuver.
There is, that asset has the interior all built.
Yeah. Well, at the time we were doing experiments with trying to see if we could respawn or like spawn Earth space dock around the player. So like they come up to the door and they click an interactive, and then Earth space dock moves to basically envelop the player. And so we kind of proved that at least for normal sized ships, you can there's enough room in there that you can kind of maneuver a little bit. If they bring like an Enterprise J, they're probably screwed. But I wanted to have that scene where it's like you have to like fight another starship in the dock and escape.
We have a new viewer in our channel who's named the Cable Guy, and he says he's brand new to Stowe. Do these guys make custom missions, and how do you get them? Well, yes, we do make custom missions. Unfortunately, you can't get to them at the moment. Because the Foundry tool and the missions that we make with it, it's all going through a cycle of downtime, so it's not available. They're fixing a major bug, and hopefully they will fix it and get it back sometime soon.
Yep.
So what we've done tonight is basically try and figure out ways to pass the downtime.
Yeah. And I do have some stuff lined up here for screen share.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start that up if Dragoon's all finished.
Oh, yeah. I've seen most of the interesting stuff.
Okay. Share screens. I hit the button and start. There we go. So what I'm going to start off with is just showing the extent of the madness I've got with the characters sliders. Mm-hmm. So this is what I can share with people pretty much on the fly. So at the start here, I've got basically a bunch of miscellaneous ones, but then I've got... I'm
still not getting...
still not?
Nope,
okay.
It's going now. Okay.
Okay, so anyway, yeah, so I've got main folder here. I've got previous entries for our Genesis costume challenge. Got a few of those listed off. Stuff for AEI from various missions. I've got ham sandwich. So anyone who wants a ham sandwich, I've got the sliders for a ham sandwich, which I copied off of the live stream when that one was up. From Star Trek Online 10 forward. But the other thing I've actually done is that I've actually taken a very serious look at fleshing out Starfleet security. So I've got a bunch of character sliders and also this spreadsheet here, which I have to basically codify as much as I can the organization as we have it in Stowe. So this was just a fun little side project, and it's every single Starfleet security character that I've given a name to, and every single one I've encountered in a mission, although I didn't get the one in photonomy yet. But a bunch of the other ones, one in one of Brown Dwarf's 42's missions, one in Starfar Theta's missions, and then everything from SSF. And surprisingly, not that much for 15 missions, or 8 SSF missions plus AEI. But yeah, I've got join date, current rank, department, and just a little bit of notes, not too much in the backstory, but just sort of the major details I can sort of go back and look up if I need to. And on top of that, I've also got, if I go back a little bit, I've got some... Make sure I just don't click on one folder in particular, the secret folder. But I do have some dialogue and short stories. And basically just written out in full, and just some miscellaneous... let's see, I've got my... those are the first contact stories. Proposal. But yeah, this was the... one of the story idea I had for the revamp of SSF as a KDF mission. I did create a short story primer for that, just to kind of work through the ideas, how I would reset the characters and work through things in a slightly different way. I might come back to that later. We'll see. But yeah, I've kind of got a little bit of the same setup here. It just doesn't go into far as depth because I don't have, at the moment, a whole lot set up for miscellaneous things that have worked outside the Foundry, because a lot of that just goes to my hard drive. But yeah, that's what I've got going on the side. Just a lot of the same type of slider information, or a lot of the same promo, intro, and works in progress. And in addition to the slider bucket with all the information. So yeah, that's something I've got going. We've all Google Drive is very useful for at least just keeping all this information together, moving around, and also being able to share it on the fly too. Because that's what I do with the Taylor files. So I've got a big folder of those, and players can just download those, copy them into the Taylor screenshot folder, and yeah, they can use some of my designs. I do have that for Jagoro too, and a bunch of other ones. But she's been the only one that's been directly requested.
You've managed to create a popular character.
I have.
Now somebody's going to want to go back and do the go back in time and shoot Jagoro.
Oh yeah.
Break time.
And just someone will do that. And
no, but then what you have to do is create another mission where the player character is sent back in time to prevent her assassination.
You know what this is? This is Heathen Dog's first mission.
Easy way to do your first mission is to kind of pick up on a plot line that has been done before and sort of recreate it a little bit with your own twist. And so this one is obviously Terminator.
Yeah, basically. And then let's see.
So someone shows up and saves Jagoro from being assassinated, and says, "Come with me if you want to live."
Yeah, and oddly, I've actually considered that as maybe like a wrap-up SSF missions of actually doing a time travel where you actually go back to the events of Gemini and take over for yourself through that whole thing. So there's a certain point where Ross knocks you out and then just says, "Okay, I've taken care of you. You're in a very safe place, and just go do this thing." And then later it's like, "Well, you may have escaped a little bit, but no worries."
And do you encounter your past self up on stage singing "Johnny Be Good"?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. But I mean, if I want to say that the players set themselves up in an EV suit, I could do that. Or Ross has put him in a fancy, locked him in an EV suit just to be sure that no one catches wise. And this can get very out of hand very quickly. And
yes, absolutely, it could.
Yeah. So. Yep, and we're back on Nimbus.
All right. Well, I think that'll probably do it for us today. We will hope that Foundry comes back very soon.
We shall hope, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we definitely appreciate what Cryptic is doing to get the Foundry back online. It was a big effort to try to bring it back online yesterday, and we definitely appreciate the effort just seeing, hey, what could they do within the limited time they had to try to sort out the endeavor. So yeah, we'll see what comes up. I just recommend patience for people. Just kind of take it easy, take a breather, kind of plan on what you guys are going to be doing next. Mm-hmm. And when the Foundry comes back, just get right onto it.
Now, we will be taking a break next week because of the holidays, but we'll be back after that, and hopefully we'll give those 2 weeks, and Cryptic will hopefully have the Foundry back up. Fingers crossed.
Here's hoping.
So, Dragoon, if you want to put up our contact information.
Yep. Just as my Stowe was timing out. We can be reached by email at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also on Twitter at foundryroundtab. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Duncan can be reached at Gorgonops_SSF. Mark can be reached at Markhawkman. And I, of course, can be reached at Greendragoon.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone, for joining us. And until next time, we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night.